At Sierra, discover great deals on top brand workout gear, like high-quality walking shoes, which might lead to another discovery.
40,000 steps, baby. Who's on top now, Karen?
You've taken the office step challenge a step too far. Don't worry, though. Sierra also has yoga gear. It might be a good place to find your zen. Discover top brands at unexpectedly low prices. Sierra, let's get moving.
Your data is like gold to hackers, and they'll sell it to the highest bidder. Are you protected? McAfee helps shield you, blocking suspicious texts, malicious emails, and fraudulent websites. McAfee Secure VPN lets you browse safely, and its AI-powered text scam detector spots threats instantly. You'll also get up to $2 million of award-winning antivirus and identity theft protection, all for just $39.99 for your first year. Visit McAfee.com. Cancel anytime. Terms apply.
It is Monday, March 24th, 2025. Welcome back to Hang Up and Listen, the sports podcast here at Slate. Back with you yet again. I'm Alex Kirshner. I'm a contributing writer here at Slate. I also co-host Split Zone Duo, a national college football podcast. We have much to go over this week. It's about to be opening day in Major League Baseball. We'll talk about what we're excited about, what we are unexcited about, and what is a lingering point of curiosity as the season begins. The NCAA basketball tournaments are in full swing, heading towards the regional rounds of both the men's and women's tournaments. I'll note that as we record this, there are a few more women's games in the round of 32 of that tournament, but you get the idea. We're moving forward. Where have the good games been? It's a question lots of people are asking or were asking until my alma mater, the University of Maryland, provided one last night in the men's tournament. We will cover the legacy of the late George Foreman, one of the great athletes to ever walk this earth, and also an icon in the art of pivoting from athletics to business success. As usual, joining me this week is Lindsay Gibbs, the publisher of Power Plays, a newsletter that covers the biggest stories of the moment in women's sports. Lindsay, did you have a George Foreman grill in your kitchen growing up?
Oh, absolutely. I loved the George Foreman grill, especially like in my 20s as I started going on diet after diet. Like the George Foreman grill was a staple. I loved it.
Ben Lindbergh, you are senior editor at The Ringer, and you are a co-host of Effectively Wild, a baseball podcast. Did you have a Foreman in your kitchen?
Definitely. Faithful Foreman griller for years, especially my young adult years, living for years in small Manhattan apartments with very few kitchen skills. That thing was a centerpiece of my meal prep. And actually, this feels fitting, but we recently retired our Foreman. And just this weekend, we used our new air fryer for the first time. So end of an era. RIP to George Foreman and to my Foreman grill, though I guess there's a George Foreman air fryer too, which doesn't surprise me.
I feel like I will probably make a panini in honor of Mr. Foreman when I get back to my kitchen very soon, except I have to admit that in the past few years, the proliferation of the panini press market has maybe been the ultimate testament to what the Foreman grills built. And I think there's a real case that in addition to his boxing prowess, he popularized a new type of appliance in our kitchens. We'll talk a lot about George Foreman later in this episode. Before we get into our business, as always, we want to thank our Slate Plus members for making this show possible. Subscribing to Slate Plus helps us make this show, and it allows you to get the show ad-free, which is a great perk. But more than that, you get bonus episodes. And there is good news. We have one of those live right now for Slate Plus members. It is about the latest turns in Donald Trump's effort to be a sports president. Feels like these happen a lot, and we have seen a significant turn in that direction in the world of hockey in the last few days. You can hear that episode right now as long as you are a Slate Plus member. Subscribe by going to Apple Podcasts and clicking Try Free at the top of our show page, or visit slate.com/hangupplus to get access wherever you listen. I would add that you get lots of other Slate podcasts ad-free or with bonus episodes attached to them if you're a Slate Plus subscriber. Very much worth checking out in my view. Ben Lindbergh, it's the Major League Baseball season. By the time we record next, every team will have opened their season. Of course, the Cubs and the Dodgers have already played regular season games in Tokyo, but we don't count that as opening day, right?
Yeah, qualified opening day. It was a fun event that many, many millions of people watched, but it's not real, authentic opening day.
One of my favorite games, either at the beginning or end of something significant, often do it around the new year, is Rosebud Thorn. You go around the campfire or what have you, and you talk about a rose. That's a thing that you really like or you're really looking forward to or you really enjoyed. You talk about a thorn, a thing you really didn't or aren't excited about. And talk about a bud, a point of curiosity that you could see developing into something good if things go well. Ben, we'll start with you, as you are our most expert baseball analyst here on the verge of another Major League Baseball season. What is your rose about this Major League season coming up? What are you excited about?
Well, lots of things, of course. I'm eagerly anticipating full seasons of Paul Skeens, who might come up again in a second, and Jacob deGrom, and rookie Roki Sasaki, and Shohei Ohtani's return to pitching, and what wonders Ellie De La Cruz has in store for us. But more broadly, baseball is my favorite sport for many reasons, but one of them is that in season, it's always on. So it's a constant, just soothing balm in the background, even when everything else is on fire, which isn't to say that I could ignore the news, even if I wanted to. And sometimes that news intersects with baseball, as it did last week with all the uproar over a Jackie Robinson article that was temporarily taken down from the DoD website, and reporting about MLB making DEI-related changes to its website after Trump's executive order, and speculation about how a travel ban would affect international players, plus the previous Trump stumping for Pete Rose's reinstatement. So real life will continue to intrude on the sport. But baseball will be there day in, day out for the next 7 months, and that is nice. And the other aspect of it is that I really want to savor this season because it could be the last one that's kind of normal for a while. And we haven't had a whole lot of normal baseball seasons lately because there were the pandemic seasons with no fans or fewer fans and one with a 60-game schedule. Then there was the lockout heading into 2022. Then there were all the rules changes in 2023, which I liked for the most part, but still, it was not normal. The CBA expires next December, and everyone seems to think that it will lead to a lockout with some chance of a shortened or canceled season in 2027, which will hang over all of next year. And we'll also probably have the ball strike challenge system implemented next season for better or worse. So we're just at the tail end of this little lull of regular baseball before everything changes again. And I just want to enjoy the bland, sometimes boring baseball that we know and love.
Also, to that point, this could be the last year. Seems likelier than not that it will be the last year, though you never know with these things. For a while, that baseball is on ESPN. And so turning on a Yankees-Red Sox game, that's probably what it will be, on some Sunday night. And just having it on in the background is another thing that could be going away. Soon, you might have to do that on Peacock or Apple TV Plus, or who knows.
Yeah, we talk a lot on Effectively Wild about the joy of baseball naps. Just put on baseball, maybe just doze off. You could say that that's not a nice thing to say about a sport if you could fall asleep while listening to it or watching it, but I think it's actually nice. It's just something that washes over you. There are more than 2,000 games individually. Most of them aren't super important, but it's just kind of your constant companion throughout the year, and that companion is about to be back.
Lindsay Gibbs, what's exciting you as we are in rose season for Major League Baseball?
I mean, it's so basic. And well, Ben basically in his overview mentioned everything I'm going to talk about in this segment. So, you forgot the spoiler alert there, Ben. But to be super basic, Shohei Ohtani pitching, I cannot wait. There was so much fear, or at least in the small bit of baseball news I consumed, that we might not see this again, that there was a possibility that the risk of this was going to be too great or he wouldn't be able to get healthy enough. And now it seems like we will get to see Shohei Ohtani pitch again, that he really wants to, and that we'll probably get to see it, before it's officially summer. And that's just something I've got marked on my calendar. I think that's going to be really fun. And to be also really cheesy, I'm really excited for a baseball season with the Hang Up and Listen crew. And I think last year, if you were listening in the playoffs, I was searching for a team. For a lot of sports reporters, summer is, if you cover football or like the NBA or men's basketball, the summer is kind of your off season. For me, with women's sports, summer is women's soccer and women's WNBA and tennis and golf. So there's just, the summer is the busiest sports calendar for me. But I'm once again taking pitches for, a team that I can have as my go-to team to be paying attention to. The Dodgers feels too obvious, but I don't want to root against the Dodgers. That's a thing. I don't want to root against Ohtani because that brings me joy. So but I want a team that I can check in with that can bring me this peace that Ben is describing amidst the chaos. So
who did we pick for you last year?
remember.
Oh, I do.
Clearly you formed a deep bond.
Lindsay became closely bonded with the San Diego Padres.
Right, the Padres.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I think
they should still be fun.
That lasted like a week because they got out very soon after we made that vote.
Yeah, it was a brief but torrid affair.
Yeah, so I just one of many. But, I'm taking bids for a long-term relationship here is what I'm saying.
Can I interest you in a team on the south side of Chicago that does not get as much attention as the Cubs, but could be at the early stages of building something great?
This is the one that just had the record-setting losing streak, Alex?
That's why you get in on the ground floor, Lindsay.
Yep. Can only be up from here. But yeah, I will second your Ohtani pick because as great as he was as a DH and first 50-50 player and all that, there's nothing like the two-way experience, which has been appointment viewing in my household, just being able to set aside a day when you know that he's going to pitch and also hit. And sadly, we will have to wait a little longer because he won't be back until at least May, seemingly. He sort of slowed his comeback to pitching amid the Tokyo series and ramping things up as a hitter, but he will be back at some point. Not that the Dodgers need him at this point, seemingly, but a few of their guys will get hurt, and then they'll be happy to have the cavalry arrive.
Ben, one of the things I've always enjoyed about baseball is the different ways to skin a starting rotation. So they like to say, last year the Tigers made a Cinderella run to the playoffs, basically while having one starting pitcher, 1.5. He happened to be the best one in the world, but
yeah, that helps.
The Dodgers are going into this year with like what you could call one of the most stacked pitching rotations of all time. Blake Snell is here, most recently from the Giants. Yoshinobu Yamamoto is here, huge contract. Roki Sasaki, we've talked about. Tyler Glasnow, Ohtani when he gets back. Clayton Kershaw is still in here somewhere. There are more other names. It does seem like most of these guys' arms have exploded in the recent past or will explode going forward. Is that kind of the idea here? Just we're going to have a great pitcher starting every night, but there will be like 9 of them?
Pretty much, yeah. They already have had an entire rotation's worth of pitchers on the IL as they did last year, and so it's just kind of a war of attrition for them. It's just, let's get through the season losing as few of these guys as possible and hopefully have a few standing by the time October rolls around, which is literally what happened last year. They had a few, maybe 3, charitably healthy and effective starters, and it worked. They managed to make that work and win the World Series, but that's not the idea. That's not the goal. So they are going to go with a 6-man rotation when Ohtani's back, and it's just aces all the way down, but we'll see how many of them are down by the time the regular season ends.
Aces and injury concerns. This is relevant to me. My happiness with baseball this season has already been a little bit threatened by Jared Jones of the Pittsburgh Pirates, my hometown team, reporting elbow discomfort, kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop there. Don't think it's going to be good. Never is. But we've got one more powerful right arm, an even more powerful right arm that has yet to explode. I'm knocking on wood as I say it. Paul Skeens is a Pittsburgh Pirate. This is my rose for this baseball season. The Pirates are my favorite team. We've discussed this. And, Ben, you checked me on this. Pretty good case that Paul Skeens is going to be the best pitcher in the world this year. I mean, Tarek Skubal exists. I'm not saying he's better than Skubal, but thinks he could get there, right? It doesn't seem unreasonable. And so the idea of the possible best pitcher in the world pitching at PNC Park is exciting for me. And I'm actually going to set aside my cynicism about the team's offseason and how they surrounded him or any of that. And I'm just going to note that every 5 days, I'm going to get to watch Paul Skeens pitch for my favorite team. And that pleases me.
Yeah, me too. I'm excited. And he throws so hard that it is scary. And he's added some new pitches this year as if he didn't have enough weapons already. So he was one of the best pitchers in baseball from the day he debuted last year. And so now with an expanded arsenal, with most of the workload constraints removed so that we'll just see a full season of him. He's talked about, getting ready for 240 innings, which is almost certainly hyperbolic, but I like that he's at least thinking that. And yeah, it's either Skubal or Zach Wheeler or Skeens, probably, when it comes to the conversation of who's the best baseball pitcher right now. So I'm extremely excited for him. And he's just sort of the great hope for starting pitching in general in MLB these days. Can a starter still be a star? Can a starter stay healthy and durable?
Let me see your happy attitude and make you sad. Your thorn involves pitchers who have been what Paul Skeens threatens to be and are still active major league pitchers, except we have questions, and in some cases, active injuries already with some of these guys.
Yeah, this is sort of bittersweet, more so than pure thorn. Every rose has its thorn, I guess. You take the good with the bad, but I am going with the possible swan songs of Justin Verlander, Max Scherzer, and Clayton Kershaw, the three best pitchers of their era. Verlander is 42, Scherzer is 40, Kershaw is 37, but perennially injured. I guess you could call them all perennially injured at this point. Kershaw is out until maybe June and is kind of an afterthought in that LA super rotation that we just listed. Scherzer sticks out like a sore thumb because he has one. Literally, his thumb gets sore after 50 pitches or so, which makes it hard for him to grip the ball, and which he says has led to other injuries in recent years. But both he and Verlander have pitched well this spring, and Verlander won a Cy Young Award just 3 years ago, but also had a 5.5 ERA last year and was left off the Astros playoff roster. So I'm hoping that this trio collectively has something left in the tank, but they're all on one-year deals, and if that year doesn't go well, this could be it. So I guess the odds are against all three of them retiring in unison after this season, but I wouldn't be surprised if that happened. And the only silver lining there would be that they would go into Cooperstown together, which would be a hell of a Hall of Fame class. But I think the fact that we're talking almost exclusively about starting pitchers thus far speaks to that hunger that baseball fans have for the dominant starters of yore. And these guys are three relics of that age. So let's hope for one last hurrah.
There was a name that you didn't mention there, which was Jacob deGrom, who is only a touch younger than the youngest of those guys. His arm has already done its exploding for what we hope is the final time. He's had injury issues. He's in Texas now. Are you, by not putting him in the swan song category, are you somewhat optimistic that we might get to see a guy who was only a few years ago the best pitcher in the world be great again?
I am, yeah. And what encourages me is that he recently spoke about how he's taking a little off, because I've been kind of banging this drum for years, just saying Jacob deGrom was great. He was the best pitcher in baseball when he was sitting 96 miles per hour. And he kept ramping it up higher and higher and higher, sitting 99, touching triple digits. And it was fun to watch. He was incredible. He was maybe the best pitcher ever on an inning per inning basis as a starter. But there was very much an Icarus aspect to watching him do that, and just knowing his elbow was going to blow up at a certain point, and it did. So the fact that now he's talking about, hey, I can succeed at 96 or 97 and I still have this otherworldly stuff, makes me hope that he is prioritizing staying healthy and that he actually will. And he still seems to be dominant. So I am hoping that we get just one more full season from him, reasonably healthy season, to kind of burnish his Hall of Fame case, which is all peak, not career right now. And also the Rangers really need him. And he's just one of the most fun pitchers to watch ever when he's healthy.
Lindsay, a thorn bothering you on the eve of the season?
Yeah, it's going to be, once again, pretty basic and something Ben mentioned, but I think last week the MLB removing the reference to diversity from its homepage in the wake of the DEI attacks of the Trump administration. I just feel like baseball is ripe to be politicized in a really uncomfortable way this upcoming season. And as I try and get more into it for fun, that is something I am really not looking forward to. And I know we're going to talk more about Trump and sports and the way the administration is using sports in our bonus segment. So I'll save a lot of my thoughts for that. But just the timing of the baseball season right now, how conservative leaning it already is, and the shows that kind of the baseball leaders are already cowing a little bit, just by removing any mention of diversity. it makes me nervous.
Yeah, I share your anxiety there. My Rose was all about, let's just ignore everything else and bury ourselves in baseball and it'll be blissful. But life doesn't work that way.
I will note that probably the most powerful, and this is a shocker, this was an upset that it worked out this way, probably the most notable example of Donald Trump going to a sporting event and not being well received was baseball, when he showed up at the 2019 World Series in Washington, D.C. And the crowd at the Nationals-Astros series was, let's just say it was not very UFC or SEC football towards him. So who knows?
A good point.
Maybe the National, I don't think the Nationals are going to be in the World Series this year, and I don't think he's going to attend some regular June game, but who knows? Maybe the resistance is buried somewhere deep within the sport. My thorn involves the Colorado Rockies. I love some things about the Colorado Rockies. I love that the Colorado Rockies are in what, in baseball terms, is a small market, and yet every year, fans turn out to Coors Field in droves, even when the Rockies are terrible, and now they are always terrible, and support this team. And I've been to Denver only a handful of times, but you walk around, and it's pretty clear that the Rockies have a great grip on this city and one of the best fan bases in baseball. Cool ballpark, obviously a unique ballpark where the baseball flies differently and farther than it does anywhere else. And yet, I am afraid that the Rockies are not paying that back in a couple ways. Number one, and this isn't really their fault, Major League Baseball messing with the balls that are played with in Colorado has significantly dulled the hitter's paradise effect there in the last few years. I think that's no fun. I like it when the playing field itself sort of is a player in the game, and Coors Field is a little bit less so than it was. But what I really don't like is that the owner of the team, Dick Monfort, has been probably one of the loudest criers about baseball's economics not being fair to teams like the Rockies. Last week, talking to the Denver Gazette, he was complaining about, quote, the competitive imbalance in baseball has gotten to the point of ludicrosity now. I don't think I'd ever actually heard ludicrous put into a noun form. I'm not entirely sure if that's right, but it might be. I haven't pulled up the Merriam-Webster's on this. Ben, baseball might not be quote unquote fair, but what is fair in life? And also, it wasn't baseball that required the Rockies to pay Chris Bryant $27 million this year after he's fallen off a cliff, or to have a pitching staff of $10 to $16 million guys who are just terrible even before you factor in Coors Field. I don't like that there is this franchise that should be kind of a jewel of baseball in terms of the fan support in a place where baseball's owners like to pretend that kind of thing is impossible, and that has had some really incredible postseason runs over its history, and that is just wilting on the vine like this. I'm afraid this is one of the most hopeless teams in baseball. Am I wrong?
You are not. I think I'd go with ludicrousness personally, but I do enjoy his coinage there. But they are the most mystifying team in Major League Baseball, and maybe in all of sports, just in the sense that they don't seem to have a plan. They are potentially 5 to 10 years behind most other teams when it comes to data-driven ways of looking at the game. They are unfailingly loyal to their employees, players, and front office members, which is a quality that you might praise if they were more successful, if anyone seemed to have any idea what they were doing there. And so there are a lot of bad teams, but some of those bad teams, like the Marlins, the White Sox, they seem to at least have a plan. Currently, they seem to be bad on purpose to some extent. They're trying to be better. They're tearing it down and kind of tanking, but rebuilding. Whereas the Rockies are just perpetually in this no man's land where they seem to think they're better than they actually are and that everyone else thinks they are. And so you can't ever forecast that, yes, they're going to be better X years down the road. And they have, spent more than the true misers, and they also have developed some players, but they just have failed in so many other areas that they cannot put a competent team together. But Monfort will answer emails if you just email him, as fans regularly do. He'll just send back an email that says, like, sent from my iPhone or my iPad or whatever. So there's almost like a mom and pop shop aspect or element to the Rockies right now, which just makes them kind of a fun punching bag, but not fun for fans who really do support the team. Affordable beer at that park too, from what I understand.
Buds. Lindsay, why don't we start with you on buds? Something that you are curious about. Could go either way, maybe, but it's got potential.
I think that there's a lot. I mean, are the Mets going to take over New York? I think is kind of on the table. And have they really turned things? It seems like they really turned things around. Like, this feels real, but it's the Mets. So I have my doubts. And the Yankees have, as we've discussed, there's been some question marks in spring training. They've had some bad luck with pitching. What's the showdown going to be? The New York tabloids. Can the Mets be the little brother team that finally gets to take over in this world of, Jets and
Islanders.
Nets and Islanders. So that's what I'm going to be paying attention to. I lived in New York for a long time, and I love something that kind of equates to a New York media race as well.
That's a good one. They've got the higher payroll. They've got the superstar that they poached away from the Yankees this offseason. They've got the owner who doesn't stop at spending compared to the Steinbrenners who do. So, yeah, there does appear to be a bit of a role reversal there.
But the Yankees have some facial hair this year. So,
They do. Yeah.
It's a close call.
Yeah. Mine is, I guess it encompasses the Mets and the Yankees probably, but potentially we're going to have the highest number and percentage of 500 or better teams ever. There's just a lot of mediocrity, but a lot of teams that should have winning or winning-ish records. Fangraphs currently projects 19 teams to finish 500 or better, which sounds wrong because it is a zero-sum sport, obviously, and you have to have a 500 record overall, but the distribution is shaking out that you're probably going to have more winning teams, many more winning teams than losing teams. That would be a record, 19 teams, both as a percentage of all teams in the league and just the raw total. And there were 18 last year, which is tied for the record. So it does seem to be a trend. And it's a combination of there being no real super teams except for the Dodgers, and then a handful of truly terrible teams, and then everyone else, just this vast, mediocre middle. And I can't decide whether this is good or bad. I think it's related to the incentives of the expanded playoffs and the randomness of the baseball playoffs. Just if you can get in, that's good enough because, it tends to make the offseason a little slower. There aren't a lot of teams that are decent to good, but are really trying to get much better because ultimately, as long as you're fairly confident that you're going to make it to the playoffs, then you don't really have that much incentive to go from good to great because it only matters so much in October. But then again, not every team that's decent is assured to get into the playoffs this year because, again, there's so many teams in that bucket. So the good thing is that there are a ton of teams that figure to be in it, that have hope, that will probably be in a wild card race until right up at the end of the season. Plus, it minimizes the impact of the playoff randomness, just the narrative blowback that we get when we have upsets. Because if all the teams are kind of evenly matched, as they mostly were last year, then no one can get that upset about one team knocking off another. But it does tend to suppress some of the offseason activity and also makes you feel like, is there true excellence in the league, or are we watching just a bunch of kind of okay teams go at it? So it's really about like whether you want to see the best or you just want to see close competition.
Yeah. I mean, do you look at the NBA and NHL regular seasons and think, wow, I want baseball to be like that, where there's a lot of focus on who's got, well, for now, let's say it's the 6th seed in a conference or in a league in baseball's case. Do you want that? Some people might want that. Some owners might want that of teams that don't want to invest in top talent. But I'm with you, Ben. I'm not 100% sure that I want that.
Yeah, it's a long regular season. There are a lot of games, and the effect of this is that we end up just watching the wild card races, and we end up talking about, the 6th best versus the 8th best team in each league instead of focusing on the top teams because they're not really that much better. So, yeah, it has its pluses and minuses, which is why it's a bud.
My bud, and this one really could go either way, but I am going to watch it, is 2 teams, the Athletics in Sacramento and the Rays in Central Florida. We would call Steinbrenner Field more Tampa than where they actually play. They play in St. Petersburg, typically at Tropicana Field. 2 teams playing in minor league ballparks for an entire home slate of their games. The Rays situation, I think, is maybe a little less interesting and just is a mess, and I sort of enjoy tracking a mess. They've had a huge fight with local authorities over their efforts to get long-term stadium financing for a permanent new home in the Tampa area. And all of that was thrown into further chaos when a hurricane ripped off the roof of Tropicana Field. So they are kind of fighting a two-front war right now, where they're going to play these games in the Yankees spring training home and a Yankees minor league park, Steinbrenner Field, while also trying to figure out where they're going to play for the future. And I don't think anybody, including them, knows where that will be or if it will be in the Tampa area. Set that aside, though, for a second. I'm really interested in the Athletics in Sacramento playing in a minor league ballpark that is, as I understand it, like a bandbox. The ball just flies out of there in Sacramento. It's a crime against baseball that they are here. I don't want to offer unqualified praise for this in any sense of the term. I wish this weren't happening, but now that it is, Ben, could we see some really odd distortions of Major League Baseball with the Athletics playing in this park? It does feel, and I've looked at some of the data, and it's almost harrowing if you're a pitcher. The ball seems like it is just going to soar out of this place.
Yeah, I feel bad for our league, but this is tremendous content. I guess it will certainly be interesting. I don't know how Sacramento will play. There are people who have said that, yes, it will be just a circus there. And others have said, maybe not so much, because it was kind of a pitcher's park in the minors. But it's hard to map the minor league park factors onto the big leaguers because these are major leaguers and they're better at baseball. So there is some possibility, though. And the A's, which was sort of sad, but, they kind of advertised it as come see Aaron Judge and Shohei Ohtani visit Sacramento, which is, that's a testament to the roster the A's have put together and the way they have operated their organization. Although they have made more investments in that roster and they've extended some of their guys this offseason. So it's actually not a terrible team. They have some hope of contention, but it's going to be weird. How will those facilities hold up? Will it be too hot? Will the field be okay? Does the community respond? And I'm kind of curious also about whether either of these teams has the lowest average attendance in the league, because you'd think they'd have to, because the capacity is like 14,000 in Sacramento and 11,000 in Tampa. These are minor league parks, but the Marlins exist. And also the White Sox. So I think they may give those two teams a run for their money or the lack thereof. But yeah, it's going to be interesting. And it really speaks to something that we've been talking about in baseball forever, which is the A's and Rays unsettled situations and how they have to get settled before we can talk about expansion. And then speaking of another Bud Selig and his constant refrain about hope and faith and how he just wanted every team to have a chance. These two teams have a chance, despite the fact that they are playing in minor league parks.
How can you not be romantic about baseball? Looking forward to the season. Looking forward to talking about it with the two of you on Hang Up and Listen. Up next, March Madness has been not very mad, but also still maybe entertaining. We'll see.
Eczema isn't always obvious, but it's real. And so is the relief from Ebglyss. After an initial dosing phase of 16 weeks, about 4 in 10 people taking Ebglyss achieved itch relief and clear or almost clear skin. And most of those people maintain skin that's still more clear at 1 year with monthly dosing.
Ebglyss, lebrikizumab LBKZ, a 250 milligram per 2 milliliter injection, is a prescription medicine used to treat adults and children 12 years of age and older who weigh at least 88 pounds or 40 kilograms with moderate to severe eczema, also called atopic dermatitis, that is not well controlled with prescription therapies used on the skin or topicals, or who cannot use topical therapies. Ebglyss can be used with or without topical corticosteroids. Don't use if you're allergic to Ebglyss. Allergic reactions can occur that can be severe. Eye problems can occur. Tell your doctor if you have new or worsening eye problems. You should not receive a live vaccine when treated with Ebglyss. Before starting Ebglyss, tell your doctor if you have a parasitic infection.
Searching for real relief? Ask your doctor about Ebglyss and visit ebglyss.lilly.com or call 1-800-LILY-RX or 1-800-545-5979.
Some people just know they could save hundreds on car insurance by checking Allstate first. Like, to check the Jumbotron first, before attempting to eat a stack of Supreme nachos in one bite. Now you're just a meme that everyone shares on game day. Checking first is smart, so check Allstate first for a quote that could save you hundreds. You're in good hands with Allstate. Savings vary, subject to terms, conditions, and availability. Allstate Fire and Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates, Northbrook, Illinois.
Bucket to keep its season alive. Gillespie from the out of bounds to the freshman Queen who's driving, floats it. Oh! Maryland on the right side of a buzzer beater with life into the Sweet 16.
That was Derek Queen, the 5-star true freshman for my Maryland Terrapins, saving us from losing to the 12th-seeded Colorado State in the round of 32 of the men's NCAA tournament on Sunday night. I just wanted to play that. Felt a little bit of pride this morning in my school and having the opportunity to play it. But aside from that, the nation was agog over the weekend at March Madness just not being that mad. The rounds of 64 and 32 in the men's tournament very nearly, until that moment, passed without a single buzzer beater to decide a game. Things were really chalky in a way that they usually are not. Top 4 seeds were 16-0 in the opening round, the 6th time since the tournament expanded to 64 teams in the 80s that has happened. The Sweet 16 is Cinderella-less, really, with the only double-digit seed being number 10 Arkansas, which is not a very high seed, and also their coach is John Calipari, so that doesn't feel very upset-ish. Matt Norlander of CBS noted that for the first time in tournament history, just 4 conferences comprise the Sweet 16 in the men's tournament, and it's the 4 biggest ones, the Big East, the Big Ten, the SEC, and the ACC. So not a whole lot of madness in the men's tournament. And then the women's tournament, a somewhat similar picture. The tournament had a firecracker of a game in the round of 32 on Sunday when number 5 Kansas State went to Lexington to beat number 4 Kentucky in overtime. I would argue that was the best game of the weekend in either tournament, but it was a 4-5 game. Neither team was really a Cinderella. The women's tournament had the same thing going on with the top 4 seeds getting out completely clean through the opening round. 6 teams scored 100 points in their first round games. That was a record. Lindsay, you were in the building in Durham, North Carolina on Sunday to watch a number 2 seed Duke struggle a good bit with number 10 Oregon before winning by 6 in a game where neither team got to 60 points. And given the weekend in both tournaments, that constituted pretty serious action. Do you think this is a sick, twisted narrative that the tournaments have not been very good? Or if not, why do you think it's unfolded this way so far?
Listen, I think we love buzzer beaters and we love big upsets because they don't happen 100% of the time. They're not a guarantee. When they do happen, they're special. And those years where we get a flurry of upsets all within an hour and, buzzer beaters, the ecstasy from those moments carry us for years. But you're not, and this year is more chalk than other years. I don't want to pretend, but I see it a little bit more as just that's what happens sometimes. Sometimes it's not as exciting. And that's the beauty of sports is sometimes it's chalk, sometimes it's not. There are no guarantees until there are. And the second you get comfortable with those guarantees, everything will be upended again. So listen, I've been really busy here in North Carolina with Duke, Carolina, and State are all hosting on the women's side this weekend. On the women's side, the top 4 seeds host their little pods, their little first weekend pods. So it's been just a thrilling few days for me, and the women's first round starts on Friday, and so the second round doesn't end till Monday. So we've still got the second day of the second round of the women's tournament to go. But so I would say, yeah, has it been a little disappointing as I've been checking scores and waiting for that hour of pure chaos that hasn't quite happened? Yes. Or I did see an overtime game in person. I saw number 10 Oregon with a slight upset over number 7 Vanderbilt. And that was also in Cameron Indoor Stadium at Duke University on, I guess, Friday night. So there have been some electric moments. And I also, though, I love the upsets. I love the chaos. But when that doesn't exist, it usually means that this second weekend, this Elite Eight and this the Sweet 16 and Elite Eight weekend is going to be much, much better. That we're going to get some great matchups and some like electric basketball, which a lot of times the Cinderellas just put in duds this second weekend. So I'm trying to look very glass half full at all of this.
Yeah, you can do a rose or a thorn take to this, I suppose, as well. And our pal Neil Payne, who was with us a couple weeks ago, noted that it's the 7th time in the 64-team main bracket era since 1985 that 15 of the 16 teams advancing to the second weekend on the men's side were top 6 seeds. The 5th time that 12 of 16 were top 4 seeds. And yeah, the total lack of true Cinderella teams is noteworthy. But I think what's interesting about the lack of upsets is that all the chalky outcomes we've seen so far are not really an upset either. And what I mean by that is there was every reason to think that the early action wouldn't have that much madness. And when we were texting over the weekend, I was joking about my Ben Pom ratings, but I don't actually have a tournament model. But the people who do have been saying this and forecasting this for a while. It was just one of the strongest men's fields and pretty top heavy. And that tends to correlate to fewer upsets. So we have this top heavy field, kind of like we were talking about with the NFL playoffs. So slow start, but should be bangers the rest of the way. And then I guess the question is what we want from March Madness, just like we were talking about what we want from a baseball regular season. Do you want excellence or do you want close competition, even if it's among mediocre teams? Do you want the best teams to advance and exciting late round matchups and deserving champions? Or is it more about upsets and Cinderellas and long shots? And for a lot of people, I think it's probably the latter. So maybe this is, I don't know, more for the true basketball diehards who really know these teams and these players and are excited to see these matchups of people they've been watching all season long. But it is kind of interesting to talk about whether it's a blip or whether it means something. And that's always our job as sports pundits, to try to extrapolate from small samples and say, is this, the XKCD comic with the random number generator that we're making narratives about, or is this a sign of things to come or something that we can tie to larger forces going on in this sport?
Well, on that question, Lindsay, a lot of people do seem pretty comfortable making the point already that this has been the result of player compensation reform, name, image, and likeness, the transfer portal, combining to suck up the best mid-major players to the power conferences. While I don't dispute at all that that's happening, I don't know if I'm ready to say that that's why this happened. It feels like a small data set, but I'm curious. I'm not going to say it doesn't make sense either, and I'm curious where you are on that.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think, look, one-off tournaments in basketball like this, it's hard to glean direct narratives from 1 year or 2 years. It's going to take a little bit more than that. And I think that what we'll see is the power kind of swinging back and forth. I mean, for a while, the men's side was rife with more upsets because the narrative was the top teams were doing the one and done, so they had the talent, but maybe come March, didn't have the veteran leadership and the stability to get deep in the tournament. And a lot of the upsets that we would see was that dynamic. I do think that NIL is keeping some players who might be like second round draft picks in the college system a little bit longer. Maybe instead of trying in the draft, they are getting recruited by these top schools and trying to fit in there. And we're just going to have to see what ends up coming by it. I think that the lower ranked schools, though, will end up finding their swings of power within this system as well. I think there will be years where the upsets are contagious, but it's undoubtedly true that things are changing in college sports in general. I'm just not comfortable making, which is terrible for podcasting. I know.
Have a take.
I'm not comfortable making like bold declarative statements about what this means in a tournament that is fluky by design.
Yeah, we want to be hedgehogs, not foxes, right? Or foxes, not hedgehogs, the RIP 538. But I think I would also be wary of extrapolating too much from what we've seen so far this season because, as you noted, there was an increasing trend in early upsets over the past several years. So it's not as if we've seen this develop over a long term. And that could be because, yes, top college guys go into the NBA sooner, or maybe just the randomness of three-pointers and how that affects the outcomes of games. And so I see the argument that, yeah, maybe NIL and the transfer portal are skewing things more toward the top programs. But then again, that's always been true to some extent. It's just above board now. And also, there are cases where some stars will leave some of the major programs just in search of greater exposure or playing time. And then that trickles down and benefits some of the mid-majors. So I think it is probably a little too soon to say. And I think the upshot so far with this tournament is that even though most of the top seeds have made it through, like the odds haven't budged for them. I think Nate Silver had Duke as the leader when the tournament started with a 19% championship probability, and now they're still at 19% because even though those favorites have survived upset opportunities, they now have really tough paths to the title the rest of the way. Like there are just no weak teams left, so you're going to have to knock off multiple good teams to make it, and that's going to be tough too. So hopefully it will pay dividends now, and yeah, it'll be a slow start, but then it'll be, oh, this was worth it because, you know, all those lopsided games were just a prelude to close games between great teams and great players.
I tend to think that it will pay dividends. If you look at the last few years in particular of the women's tournament, when it's gotten down to the Elite Eight and the Final Four, it has been more fun because Dawn Staley and South Carolina have been there as the big bad looming over everything. And you've had number one seeds galore. You've had, you know, last year, the Caitlin Clark Iowa team had to go and survive a really brutal UConn team. You know, that's more fun than, for instance, NC State making the national semifinal as an 11 seed last year in the men's tournament and getting beaten pretty soundly by Purdue in that game. Like, I love an upset, but I love it when around Sweet 16 time, the heavyweights kind of reign. Hate to say it, but I think it makes for better basketball in the end. And I think we're going to get some of that down the stretch here. I look forward to it.
Yeah, statistically speaking, this is arguably the strongest Sweet 16 field ever. So there's some hype. There's something to look forward to.
Alex, I have a question. Does Maryland really go by the Crab 5? Is that?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I read that and I thought maybe someone was lying to me.
No, the Maryland could make a run. I'm feeling a little bit more school spirit than I usually do. Class of 2016. The Terps look pretty good. They're going to have, as every team is going to have in the Sweet 16, a tough matchup because there are no softballs left on the slate. So I look forward to watching it. Up next, George Foreman died last week. We will assess the legacy of one of the great athletes and businessmen in American history.
I can say to my new Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra, hey, find a keto-friendly restaurant nearby and text it to Beth and Steve. And it does, without me lifting a finger. So I can get in more squats anywhere I can. 1, 2, 3.
Will that be cash or credit?
Credit. 4.
Galaxy S25 Ultra, the AI companion that does the heavy lifting so you can do you. Get yours at Samsung.com. Compatible with select apps. Requires Google Gemini account. Results may vary based on input. Check responses for accuracy.
Pro Savings Days are back at Lowe's with limited time savings on the supplies pros need. Get up to 40% off select major appliances. Plus, save an additional $100 on every $1,000 you spend on select major appliances. And don't miss your chance to activate and earn 3 times the points on select DeWalt and Klein tools. Lowe's, we help, you save. Valid through 3/28. Selection varies by location. While supplies last. See associate or Lowe's.com for more details on qualifying items.
I was never really a runner. The way I see running is a gift, especially when you have stage 4 cancer. I'm Anne. I'm running the Boston Marathon, presented by Bank of America. I run for Dana-Farber Cancer Institute to give people like me a chance to thrive in life, even with cancer.
Join Bank of America in helping Anne's cause. Give if you can at BofA.com/supportAnn. What would you like the power to do? References to charitable organizations is not an endorsement by Bank of America Corporation. Copyright 2025.
George Foreman died last week at 76. Foreman is one of the great multi-career Americans of all time, in that a lot of people remember him for the thing that made him famous, and quite a few more, maybe even most at this point, I don't know, think of him first as a man whose name appeared in their kitchen. We already talked about the George Foreman grill in the opening of this episode, but before that, Foreman went 76-5 as a boxer. I think it speaks to his greatness in a way that his most famous bout is one he lost, the Rumble in the Jungle against one Muhammad Ali in Zaire in 1974, a fight that Ali won by knockout in the 8th round. That was a big deal because Foreman was great. He was a multi-time world champion boxer. He would go on to claim the mantle as the oldest to hold that role when he won the title as a 45-year-old in 1994. Right around that time, Foreman endorsed a kitchen grill, and the George Foreman grill became perhaps the definitive way to press a panini or something else in kitchens all across America. We all had many iterations of it in our homes growing up. I'm sure a lot of our listeners did too. He made more than $100 million to lend his name to those grills, as the New York Times reported in his obituary. And he really transcended the typical athlete endorsement market to become a mogul in his own right, someone known for something other than what he got famous for. Ben, Foreman did live a giant life. I think a lot about the Charles Barkley rule, where you can tell someone's age by whether they identify him as the NBA forward or the TNT commentator. Perhaps there should really be a George Foreman rule. And if there is one, what is George Foreman to you?
Yeah, I mean, even when he came back and became champion at 45, I was 7 years old and you were but a bouncing babe. So it's not as if we really remember him in the ring other than the highlights that we've, of course, seen many times over the years. But for people in the know, he is maybe a consensus top 10 all-time boxer. So he's plenty important and significant just in the ring, just an essential part of the Ali Frazier-Foreman rivalry, the Federer-Nadal-Djokovic of its day, though that probably undersells the significance just considering the role that boxing played in the culture at that time. But I don't think he would have as huge a legacy outside of boxing fandom for that alone, or even for his comeback and reclaiming his title as the oldest heavyweight champ. That combination of peak excellence and career longevity is pretty special. And man, I rewatched the end of the first Frazier versus Foreman fight this weekend, the Sunshine Showdown, and Foreman just completely clobbered him. You could see even now why he was so feared. But at the height of his powers in the ring, he wasn't really that well known as a personality. I guess in that analogy, he was the Djokovic. He was the youngest, latest arriving member of that trio, didn't inspire the strongest feelings just as a person. He was sort of seen as aloof, intimidating. Who knows how much that was the racial attitudes of the day, but he wasn't the kind of cuddly figure that he became, nor was he the outspoken political figure that Ali was. Foreman is remembered for waving a mini American flag after winning gold at the '68 Olympics, just a couple days after Tommy Smith and John Carlos's Black Power protest. And he was 19 years old, and he wasn't trying to counter-protest or anything. He was just happy and patriotic, but he didn't have that political dimension to him that Ali did. So I think that's why his rebranding as this almost unrecognizable, just like physically and personality-wise, gentle, personable guy, which maybe on some level he was all along, just really became his legacy for a lot of people, along with the grill.
Yeah, I mean, when I think of the grill, it's like we almost dumb it down to being just the grill, but it was his persona and he just had this charisma and this innocence, which you don't usually think of innocence and like pure soul when you think of like world champion boxers. But that's what came across through the screen, was like this pure excitement and love for this basic product. It wasn't pretentious. It wasn't pretending to be 5-star chef staple. It was to make lives easier and better. And you believed that and you wanted to be a part of that. And of course, the product, as we've discussed, was great. But I just think back to all the infomercials and the commercials I saw about Foreman growing up, and you were just drawn in by his smile. And it sounds easy to do. It sounds simple, but it's not. Not many people make you really believe that this appliance, that they're not tricking you, that they're not trying to get one over on you, that they're not scamming you, that they're not using you, that they just like legitimately want to help you, like make your life better. And there's just something so pure about that.
The lean, mean, fat grilling machine.
Right.
It tapped into both of those things. Mean, it's telling you it's George Foreman, and it's grilling your fat for you. It's making your life better. It was a good advertising pitch. Have to give it to him.
Yeah. Yeah. And he didn't invent the grill, but he brilliantly took advantage of it. And I'm sure he had no idea of the phenomenon it would become. But man, it made him mega rich. In a 2014 interview, he was asked about the estimates that he had made more than $200 million on the grill. And he said, much more.
Oh.
There were months I was being paid $8 million per month just for the grill. And yeah, I think he did have a lot to do with its success just as an effective spokesman. I don't know whether it would have done equally well with someone else because it was a quality product, which is not normally something you say about something you see on infomercials. The return on investment there was uncommonly high. And there's this persistent rumor that Hulk Hogan had a chance to sponsor the grill, a rumor mostly spread by the Hulkster himself. And I'm glad that didn't happen. I'm happy that George Foreman became the name and the face of the grill and not Hulk Hogan. And I do really appreciate that combination of just like a monster in the ring, just like scary, punishing, and just sort of a sweetheart out of the ring. And, was he that all along or did he mellow with age? But I love that combination in athletes where it's just like the switch flips and, they're the most intense competitor ever during the game, but then they're like an actual human being off the field, because so often we're told that you can't have one without the other. Like in order to be the most intense competitor and to be the best at what you are, you have to be just some sort of sadist or something. You have to be just like broken inside. And that's not always the case. I mean, Foreman had a tough upbringing that he transcended and just became so successful in multiple fields. But I like that he showed that, yeah, you could be this macho big boxer, but you could also be sort of a sweetie that people love. So that was nice. And like, kudos to him for getting a great deal, even if he didn't recognize the potential of this thing that he was slapping his name and image and likeness on. He got like 40% cut or something until he was eventually bought out, which just seems pretty darn lucrative for a sponsorship deal. So well done to him and his agent.
My favorite fact about Foreman's in-ring dominance, I mentioned his record, 76-5, obviously very good, but of course there are 5 losses, talked about one of them. It's that of his 76 wins, 68 were by knockout.
Wow.
Yeah.
George Foreman, and he got knocked out himself. I mean, this happened in the famous Ali fight, but Ben, you talked about being a monster in the ring. Like, there's a style of boxing, and I am, as Hang Up listeners will know, not going to lay any claim to being a boxing historian, but there's a style of boxing that has become pretty popular among some of the great fighters of this time, where they'll just wear you down. They'll just pin you in your corner of the ring for 12 rounds and pummel you, and then they'll get a very obvious decision victory. That was not George Foreman's way of doing business. George Foreman left no particular doubt, and you on your back. And that's cool. That's what boxing is meant to be.
Yeah. And in the Rumble in the Jungle, I think that was said to be one of the reasons why he lost that fight, just because he wasn't really conditioned to go long, because he was so used to knocking out everyone early that he didn't have the legs for later in the match. Ali just did his rope-a-dope strategy and kind of outlasted him, but usually it wasn't possible to do that because he would just knock you out. And that was, I think, one of the factors behind his comeback. He wanted to fight Tyson, who I guess was seen as the Foreman of his day, just in the sense that he was so intimidating and he would knock you out quickly. And that didn't happen because Don King repped Tyson and they just weren't able to work that out. And maybe that's for the best. I don't know. We've seen Tyson himself has shown us what happens when an older guy tries to reclaim the lost glory, although it worked okay for Foreman. But yeah, I was also thinking that something that I thought about when Pete Rose died, or more recently Bob Uecker, Mr. Baseball, is that the days of baseball players being big pitchmen, being just the face of a national campaign and national celebrities who could anchor a campaign like that are probably over. Shohei Ohtani aside, that ship sort of sailed with Ken Griffey Jr., Derek Jeter. You could say the same about boxing, which is why we keep exhuming Mike Tyson for yet another fight. Logan Paul aside, what current boxer would be chosen to be the face of a new mass market product? I don't think they would have the name recognition or just the brand that you could have being as big as he was in the 70s.
And Floyd Mayweather couldn't do it for reasons.
Yeah.
Other reasons.
Yeah.
But I also think there's obviously all the athletes want that business success of the George Foreman grill. But do they really want their name to be more associated with the grill than with their athletic careers? I think there's a lot that don't, that their ego is too big. They take themselves too seriously and would think that's beneath them almost. And, I think what I like about learning more about George Foreman is that there is this humility at the root of him. He can admit when he's wrong. He talks about how he was a jerk when he first started because that's how he saw the other boxers acting. And he was just like, that's how I'm supposed to act towards women. That's how I'm supposed to act towards the press. That's how I'm supposed to act towards people. That's what being a world champion is. And as the, decades went on, he grew into his skin. He learned, that he could define what being a world champion was in his own terms. And, there's the fun, goofy facts, like I love that his biography is by George. Like, that's just a great name for a book. And, he named all 5 of his sons George. Also, just a great fact. And one of the 7 daughters is Georgette, but just one. So, like I said, there's this lovability. But I really loved what Jerry Brewer over at the Washington Post wrote about him. Of course, he talks about what Ben discussed about him, the public using his tiny American flag waving at the 68 Olympics to pit him against, John Carlos and Tommy Smith and the Black Power movement. And that was not what he intended with that by any means, but he wasn't a great, anti-racism activist by any stretch of the imagination. But he just evolved publicly, his persona. Brewer wrote, Foreman reveled in the multiplicity of his fame. He was a little of everything, a teen troublemaker from the 5th Ward in Houston, giddy gold medalist, surly heavyweight champion at 24, brooding loser to Muhammad Ali in the Rumble in the Jungle at 25, retired boxer and born-again Christian at 28, ordained minister, folksy ringside analyst, surprising heavyweight champion for a second time at 45, celebrity entrepreneur, endorsement king. From street brawler to huckster, he kept changing. After his awkward induction, America learned to embrace all of his shift. His growth is an American story we need to hear and cherish at a different yet still difficult time.
Yeah, he was born again in a few different ways, I guess. Religiously, yes, but also financially and professionally, just as a boxer. Just a lot of different lives, a lot of incarnations, a lot of comebacks. I think he almost went bankrupt in the 80s, which was a factor behind his comeback as a boxer. And so I think that kind of rags to riches sort of story, he probably would have appreciated. I was looking at all the headlines in the obits, and most of them led with heavyweight champion and not, grill maven. But it was somewhere like in the first paragraph usually, or close to the top, just boxer and successful businessman, and everyone knows what that refers to. And I think he probably expected that and would have embraced that because, yeah, he didn't run away from that aspect of his legacy. He seemed to be proud of it. And fortunately, I don't think it overshadowed his greatness as an athlete either.
That's all for this episode. We've also got a bonus show that is in the podcast feeds right now for our treasured Slate Plus subscribers. It is about Donald Trump inserting himself into or trying to jumpstart sports negotiations in a few areas that are not traditionally the purview of the American president. To hear that, you can subscribe to Slate Plus on Apple Podcasts by clicking Try Free at the top of our show page, or visit slate.com/hangup+ to get access wherever you listen. The episode is available right now, and we will see you there. Our show notes are at slate.com/hangup, and you can email us at hangup@slate.com. Don't forget to follow the show and rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. Our producer is Kevin Bendis. For Ben Lindbergh and Lindsay Gibbs, I'm Alex Kirshner. Remember Zelma Beatty, and thanks for listening.